Hello everyone, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to the show today. On the show today, we are talking about another assassination attempt on Donald Trump, this time at his golf course. The suspect got a little bit closer, or a little bit further away, this time. Secret Service making some marginal progress. We'll take a look at everything you need to know about that. Also, a interesting election piece zooming in on one of the most important states, Nevada. So many different variables. Got a strong union town there in Las Vegas. A lot of Hispanic citizens there. And, of course, a vibrant kind of suburb, white suburban dynamic around that Clark County, Las Vegas area. And what exactly the specific economy there has to do with all of it. Also, we have reports for you today getting into a really surprising, or I guess I shouldn't say surprising, but just bleak incident in New York City, revealing the failure of the mayor and the NYPD. There's a guy that apparently has a knife, not only on a train, and he's evading the fare. Of course, NYPD saying here he has a knife that hasn't been independently verified. And somehow, not only does the guy end up dead, but another officer ends up dead as well. We have all the details for you on that. And also, a great piece by Jack Bergenson on the Springfield situation. All right, so let's get into it today with the latest. Investigators say the man who appears to have been planning to assassinate former President Donald J. Trump at a golf course yesterday with a rifle, waited near a golf course for about 12 hours, according to a criminal complaint released on Monday. The man faces 2 federal gun charges: possessing a firearm as a felon and possessing a firearm with an obliterated serial number. The defendant, Ryan Wesley Ruth, wore a blue inmate jumpsuit, and so no charges of assassination are here. To his initial appearance in a federal courtroom in Florida on Monday, so this was down in Florida at his golf course, not near D.C. or anything like that. The defendant's name was Ryan Wesley Routh. And he left the courthouse later in the white van. His appearance came less than 24 hours after what the authorities said appeared to be the second attempted assassination attempt of the former president in just over 2 months. So a pretty surprising scene here. And all in all, my first reaction, I honestly did not stop at too much as to what I was doing, because this already happened once. It was already kind of a shocking event once, and it seemed to be a lot more dramatic the first time. That was my initial reaction. And again, I think a lot of the same dynamics that we saw and discussed with regard to the last assassination attempt are going to be in place. It's just has been a dynamic that's kind of often been spoken of just everything getting slowly crappier and crappier over time, things degrading, things getting worse in quality, and just everything kind of staying the same, but slowly just getting worse versions of the same thing. Well, it hasn't taken us a very long time to get to that with regards to kind of Trump assassination attempts, and it's not a good thing that we are in this situation. It's not a sign of a society that is in any way, functional and doing well. Nothing's going to get better if Trump is assassinated. And I think, the Trump movement looks a lot less imposing than it did, 2 months or so ago. But it still is going to be there. It's a very threatening force, as you see what it's doing to Springfield right now, as we'll talk about a little bit later on. It's definitely not going to be going anywhere, and it's not something in any way to get too worked up about. But again, I think people, the bottom line on this, and I think this is what really led the assassination attempt to the first assassination attempt to not have that big of an impact, is because people, whether you like him or you dislike him, so many people in the country that are not part of the Trump cult, I guess, for lack of it. It sounds so libby when I say it like that. It sounds like very liberal, kind of hack, but who haven't really pledged themselves to Trump. pretty much, and those, a lot of people are Republicans among that number, the people who haven't pledged themselves to Trump. So probably only 80-70% of Republicans who are totally pledged to Trump. But then, of course, you got everybody else in the country. Like, everyone else, I would say, among that strata, even if they agree with him on some other issues, will say that, hey, he's a pretty polarizing guy. He made things a lot crazier. And I think that perception is what kind of, led people to say, it's not so like we didn't kind of see it coming in a certain way. That is for sure. So yeah, according to the criminal complaint, cell phone data indicated that the Mr. Routh was in the woods near Trump's golf course in West Palm Beach for nearly half a day before the Secret Service agent spotted what appeared to be the barrel of a rifle and opened fire. So again, what happened with this guy, to be clear, he was in the golf course. The Secret Service agent sees him, fires at him, misses. The guy drops the weapon, gets into a car, and essentially runs away from there. So this is President Biden reacting to it, and of course they eventually caught him at one county over because apparently a witness coming out of the car saw him coming out of the brush on the outside of the golf course, getting into his car, a black Nissan, driving away, and was able to take a picture of that Nissan plate for them to track him down. So it's apparently he described discovery of a loaded SKS style rifle, a Soviet-era semi-automatic rifle developed in the 1940s with a scope, as well as food and a digital camera. So we had a whole campsite there in the forest. The episode particularly, the many hours apparently Routh spent so close to the course cast fresh doubts on the Secret Service's protective abilities after a would-be killer got close to Trump the second time in about 2 months. President Biden told reporters on Monday the Secret Service needs more help. Kimberly Cheadle, the former director of the Secret Service, was at 10 days after a gunman opened fire during Butler, Pennsylvania, wounding him in the ear and killing a spectator after lawmakers in both parties called for her resignation. So the charges there, possession of a firearm as a felon, is the more serious of the two charges against Routh, carrying a prison sentence of up to 15 years. And another thing worth knowing about this guy is he was very much big into Ukraine and supporting Ukraine, and probably, that was maybe his mental illness, fixation of some kind. He traveled to Ukraine. He tried to raise weapons for Ukraine. He was in Ukraine, working out of Ukraine for quite a long time. He told the New York Times, he was actually interviewed by the New York Times in 2023, that he traveled to Ukraine and wanted to recruit Afghan soldiers to fight there. The Times reporter who interviewed him recalled thinking at the time that Routh was out of his depth. Trump blamed Democrats for inflammatory language yet again, but in the speech, he urged them to, tone down their language. He called them the enemy from within and the real threat. So again, that's exactly what I think. People have priced this climate in, and they're not really going to hold anybody accountable, probably, whether it's Trump or the Democrats, really, for starting. I think people have broadly accepted that it's a fact of life, because people, if they are more political, of course, there's a bunch of people who are checked out, but the people who are more political are much more passionate about politics than they were maybe 20, 30 years ago. So, which is having a big impact on the tenor and the rhetoric, but maybe also these people this very well could have been some sort of a copycat situation. The Trump campaign has not announced any changes to the candidate's schedule for the week. He is expected to appear on a live stream to introduce a new cryptocurrency business on 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Tuesday, he's expected to hold a town hall event in Flint, Michigan, moderated by Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas, and a rally on Wednesday in Uniondale, New York, which is in Long Island. So, yeah, let's go now to what Biden had to say on it.
An acting head of the Secret Service is in Florida today assessing what happened and determining whether any further adjustments need to be made to ensure the safety of our former president. Let me just say, there is no, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, those of you who know me, many of you do, no place in political violence in America. None. Zero. Never. I've always condemned political violence. I always will in America. In America, we resolve our differences peacefully at the ballot box, not at the end of a gun. America suffered too many times the tragedy of an assassin's bullet. It solves nothing and just tears the country apart. We must do everything we can to prevent it and never give it any oxygen.
So there it is, pretty much what you would expect there from Biden, condemning all of this. There's some body camera footage that was released by the sheriff's office in Martin County, which is the county over from where the golf course is, showing the arrest near Interstate 95 on Sunday of the suspect in the apparent assassination attempt of Donald Trump. So you can hear some of the audio here. They're telling him to keep walking, and then securing, hands behind your back and all that. But you can see he's a kind of older guy, and they essentially, take him away and put him in the back of the truck. There also has been quite a bit of falsehoods online, conspiracy theories and falsehoods. Wave of speculation closely mirrored the online conversation that spread widely after the first assassination attempt in July, when a gunman fired several shots at Trump during a campaign rally. Dozens of progressive accounts shared claims that Trump had somehow orchestrated the situation that unfolded on Sunday. And you may be listening to this and be like, oh, no one on the left really thinks that. But, the chances are you probably know, if you're someone who's in kind of a culturally liberal area, somebody at least once, that you see at least once a week that does believe that. I was surprised to see how many people believe that in my own circles. The staged assassination attempt topic was trending on Monday on Twitter with nearly 30,000 posts. Users on unmoderated right-wing social media sites like Getter and 8kun, oh my God, used to the event to falsely claim the Democrats were trying to steal the election, saying that it was planned by the Secret Service or Democratic operatives to divert from negative news affecting Kamala Harris's campaign, according to Pura Technologies, a company that monitors fringe social media. Dan Bongino, who's a former Secret Service, I believe, agent, he wrote on Rumble that the video streaming platform, that it was a distinct possibility that there may be more going on behind the scenes than it appears. He said, like a mole inside the Secret Service, offering no evidence. So I'd love to hear him, expound on that as a former Secret Service agent himself. No, bottom line is there is no mole in all likelihood. It is just a classic America. It's almost boring even to talk about it. Which is kind of going to be a shame, and we'll see if this kind of trend of assassinations continues to beyond Trump. But I think it definitely is becoming a bit of is to a trend. I don't know, but it feels like with maybe assassinations that it is. But we'll see if it's just with Trump. But it does feel at this point very interesting. It's like, oh, the last one didn't matter. This one, way less dramatic, doesn't matter at all. Probably not really going to affect the outcome of the election. No sympathy bump or anything like that this time for Trump or anything like that at all. If anything, even less relevant, but still always a remarkable event when a former president who's currently running to be president is almost assassinated. Before we go any further, I do want to tell you about this opportunity to join the Supporters Club. The link is in the description. You get ad-free episodes and some bonus episodes coming soon on that subject. So we will move on now to our next story in Nevada, where this is a very interesting report by Curtis Lee, which is for the New York Times, which is essentially going through some of the states and talking about, this is what I always find interesting, like the workings of the states, the issues in the states, that trying to catch things, that's what I try to do for, the Newsflash audience, is catch things that are going to matter before other people do. So it says sold out shows along the Strip, crews constructing a course for a major Formula One race, a record number of passengers at Harry Reid International Airport. For much of the past year, Las Vegas, the anchor of Nevada's economy, has watched in delight as visitors flock to the town for conventions, football games, and summer pool parties, further solidifying its rebound from the doldrums of the pandemic shutdown. And, Nevada is or Las Vegas especially, pretty important hospitality state, as I'm sure you can imagine, which obviously means also a lot of union jobs. Statewide, the economy is still burdened by high unemployment, higher cost of living, and twin pocketbook struggles that animate voters here in one of the handful of states expected to decide the November presidential election. And about a quarter of Nevada voters in the New York Times Siena College poll last month named the economy as their top issue. It was cited nearly twice as often as any other concern comparable to finding in other swing states. a topic with particular resonance among Nevada workers. Eliminating federal taxation on tips burst into the national discourse after former President Trump told the crowd in Las Vegas that he intended to do away with the practice if he was elected. And of course, Kamala Harris copied that right away. The unemployment rate in Nevada is, which again, nearly a quarter of jobs there are in leisure and hospitality, was 5.4 in July, the highest any state. Statewide gasoline prices hover nearly $4 a gallon, among the nation's highest. So this is going to, really be affecting, I think, a lot of different people. And you have a lot of people, Trump, I saw some of the more, all in Spanish ads that he's working on at the moment, trying to put them out there. That is going to impact a lot of people in states like Nevada, people who are, union workers. And it's something that the Democrats, it's going to be one thing about, how they explain some of these local headwinds that they're dealing with the various factors and indicators of a uniquely statewide problematic economy. But the Democrats, at least as far as I know Jackie Rose, I know Kamala Harris on the state level, and obviously on the presidential level, are not really doing much of anything to actually appeal to these union workers. They're not really offering them anything. Just, I just saw a list of, 20 Reagan officials are endorsing, Kamala Harris. Like, who is that for? Who is that for? Yeah, so maybe some of the Clark County people or some of the suburban areas of Nevada, but Nevada is going to be a pretty important state. Like, this is a state that Biden could count on, Hillary Clinton could count on to get them across the line to 270, and it really does seem, and we talked about this in the past shows, that the electoral path for 270 for Kamala Harris is really kind of uncertain. There's a lot of different paths, very unclear evidence of how she's doing on each and every state. The employment outlook in Nevada has brightened since April 2020, though in June, the Las Vegas airport logged its third busiest month in history. Last year, nearly 41 million people visited the city, an increase of about 5% from 2022, according to the government. So Joe Lombardo, who's a Republican elected in 2022, said, "We've made significant progress facilitating Nevada's long-term recovery, but Nevadans are still suffering acutely from national inflation." He probably has the easiest job in the world there, just to put everything on national inflation and, Kamala Harris. And is there anybody in that state who is effectively making that case? Nearly 35,000 members of the Culinary Workers Union, Local 226, and Bartenders Union Local 165, a powerful base for Democrats, authorized a strike last fall, but last-minute negotiations with three major resorts averted a walkout. So most workers, by the end of the 5-year contract they ultimately secured, would be paid at least $35 an hour. This summer, a major issue among workers here has aligned with a catchphrase on the campaign trail: "No tax on tips." And we've seen, which is interesting, like, Nevada, the biggest union state, and the unregulated situation that unions are in this country, it's just kind of very easy for some business unionism to take place, where some of the leaders start to look out for their own interests rather than the interests of the membership. And we saw that in 2020 primary, most notably, when there was a big fight over, the healthcare, the Medicare for all situation that Bernie Sanders was proposing, and how it would get in the way with the Cadillac union healthcare plan. And a lot of people in the in the top of the leadership were very upset with Bernie Sanders. They were talking about how mean his supporters were to them online, and they were talking about how his healthcare plan was bad for union workers. But of course, it would take healthcare off the table as an issue, which would be much more powerful to union workers. And I think a lot of people recognize the benefit of everyone, the fact that they should have healthcare. So what happened? The actual rank and file members of the union were pretty pro Bernie Sanders. What I think could be happening here with this tax on tip situation, I'm sure there's a lot of pro union people, or at least on the top, that are very much supportive. But I think it's on the policy merits. I think it's to some degree it is missing the forest for the trees. Because why aren't you dealing with the long, it should be more of a step towards, again, doing things like they just did in terms of raising the hourly pay rate, but also taking away this kind of tipped, non-tipped double standard, which is only going to be a vector for driving up or driving a wedge between various sectors of the hospitality workforce, which is only going to hurt them in the long run. So again, taking that off the table, I think would be a very, very good thing, and I think that's something that I've heard. I'm a little bit skeptical, to say the least, with their past history, because I've heard this a lot from the top, but we don't know. But in terms of how it's going to impact the election, there's Trump said tax on tips first. He's somebody who is offering at least a little bit more focus on, or actively at least, or was trying to woo the Latino vote. But I think the thing is now, it's definitely going to be easier said than done for him to union voters to come in and especially union voters of color to come in and vote for Trump, especially with some of the immigration rhetoric that he's put on. A lot of people at least are they agree, believe in legal immigration, like most Americans like kind of on average do, but they definitely believe in immigration. That's another aspect of this, and also I think it is definitely very worrying that Kamala does not seem to be really reaching them in an effective way. Head of Local 226, Ted Papageorge, said that eliminating tax on tips was a good policy only if combined with getting rid of the federal sub-minimum wage for tipped workers to $13 an hour. Thank you very much. Ending taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers would significantly help millions of workers provide for their families, including in Nevada. So the Times Siena poll found Trump has the edge on the question of the economy and handling high prices, 56 to 41%. So Franco, who's a Times room service employee at the Bellagio, said she was taxed per hour on the tips that she made. Sometimes we're getting taxed for something we don't make. Franco, a member of the culinary union who earns $17 an hour, said, if you have a slow day at work, you're still getting taxed. Nixing taxes on tips, she said, would make a world of difference. Franco said that she supported Mrs. Harris and didn't blame the current administration for her state's economic struggles. It happens all the time. Every few years we go through inflation. She said, I feel like it was going to happen anyway. I just don't know when. Economic concerns extend to business owners like Javier Barajas, who owns a restaurant called Lindo Michoacan. He opened it in 1990. He's expanded several locations while operating a Mexican and Italian fusion place as well. In recent months, both President Biden and Trump have visited his establishments. Barajas said his overhead costs to run his businesses have tripled since last year, since the price of groceries have increased. Servers at his restaurants make $12 an hour, the state's minimum wage, plus tips, and hosts make $16 an hour because they do not earn tips. It is very difficult, he said. It is getting harder and harder for the small businesses to pay our bills. Again, he's voting for Trump, not a surprise there, because he wants, prices, everything was just more stable 5-6 years ago. And I think that's something that, Kamala Harris is doing her best to assuage, and I think a lot of people will have trouble, will be able to believe easier that she can stabilize things better than Biden. But the bottom line is the economy and, convincing people, at least that for workers, you're going to have their backs. I think the tax on tips thing, Kamala, looking at this, this article has kind of convinced me here that I think even the union leaders are not missing the forest from the trees on this and do see kind of, the broader picture. But also, I think it's going to be a very big problem because there's that case for the economy is definitely going to be there. It's going to be very, very hard to miss in Nevada around election time. But you're going to have people like the first lady, and you're going to have a lot of people like the second guy as well. But we'll see if, how it plays out. Definitely going to be something to watch is where the turnout goes with not necessarily people like that business owner, but more people like that room service worker. Will they say, Trump was more stable? Both people are doing tax on tips, but Trump is more stable. Or will they say Kamala is going to be a better fighter for labor? She's going to also, keep people in check, keep the bosses in check or whatever, and also isn't as crazy as Trump. We will see, and that could be a very key thing that decides a very key state in the end. All right, on to the next, a really kind of a crazy story here. This is per the New York PD, and it's been going around everywhere in New York recently. So essentially, this guy gets on the train. He is a mentally ill guy, most likely. So essentially says, a man fare evaded. The NYPD follows him up to the platform. Tasers were deployed. Madry claims, this is the police chief, Madry, claims that they saw a knife and that he charged at the cops before they opened fire, shooting him and 2 other passengers. So Madry details the cop realizing he was shot by his partner as following cops rendering aid to a man they shot, but the video only shows them cuffing him and rendering aid to themselves. And essentially, it really is a whole mess because they shoot this guy in the stomach after trying to unsuccessfully tase him after he draws a knife at the officers. And again, it's like if you are a multiple police officers, we're talking about 5 plus at least, and you are unable to, I think, bring down a guy in a knife without shooting him. I think pretty much everywhere in Western Europe, you have police that can do that. And the police, for example, in London, England, they're not perfect, but they can do that. So I think that's, it's not like you're talking about a guy with another gun as well. I think it goes to a broader conversation about how much we, expect of police officers that can go on for hours, and I will, definitely advocate for. But the point is here, this person was shot, and they end up shooting another one. One cop ends up shooting another cop, and trying to protect the subway. And Eric Adams comes out with this ridiculous tweet about shooting people left and right. And this cop was attacked. Was shot. Protecting the subway, but it turns out the cop was of course shot by another cop. So the conductor from the control booth said, this is another perspective here. At first they brandished their tasers, and then one of the officers was like, shots fired, and they just started shooting, and they shot 2 people. So it seemed like there was, again, a lot of confusion in terms of the eyewitnesses here. But this was from the Gothamist. The mom of the guy we know was shot, who brandished the knife, was Daryl Mickles. She was just coming back to her apartment in Brownsville, where a Gothamist reporter met her at the scene, coming back from her night shift as a security guard. And she was shocked because she had no idea, and the NYPD did not call her. Holloway picked up an NYPD business card that had been slipped under her apartment door. They just shot him. They didn't bother to get in touch with anybody related to him, said Holiday, who sometimes uses the first name Renee, as she stood in her living room and left a card here at the damn door. A spokesman for the NYPD later said they did not know how Holloway was notified of the incident. Police shot Holloway's 37-year-old son, Daryl Mickles, in the stomach, hitting 3 other people, including an officer, in the chaos, which is, so it's just really unclear situation after Mickles skipped his fare and drew a knife on officers who unsuccessfully tried to tase him. One bystander was struck in the head. Both the bystander and Mickles remained in critical condition on Monday morning. Another bystander was hit in the leg, and an officer discovered a bullet wound near their left armpit in the moments after the police opened fire. According to the NYPD, both of those people remain in stable condition on Monday. According to police, the chaos began when Mickles entered the Sutter Avenue L train station through an emergency exit gate. Officers followed him up 3 flights of stairs to the train platform, where he threatened to kill them if they didn't stop following him. NYPD Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry said at a news conference on Sunday, a few hours after the incident, police instructed Mickles to take his hands out of his pockets, but he refused. Madry said that the officers told him they would have to shoot him. Then he boarded the train that had pulled up into the station. 2 officers then tried to use tasers to immobilize Mickles, but then the attempts were ineffective. According to Madry, Mickles pulled a knife from his pocket and then he said he currently, according to his mother, he carried a pocket knife because he works as a chef at several restaurants around the city. His mother said, who lives in Harlem. Once Mickles pulled the knife, the officers shot him several times, striking other individuals as well, and handcuffed him. I think, bottom line is, we cannot trust these people with guns. We cannot trust these police officers with guns at this point. It is just so clear that they're just fundamentally incapable of handling these guns in a way that is respectful of human life. And just like this is just how an oaf would handle a human, a gun, and it was something with the power to kill people. I mean, you're waving around, you're somehow shooting 3 different bystanders in what is supposed to be a professional with a weapon, including one of the other officers ends up being shot. I don't know if they're taking too many people, they're not training people, but the bottom line is also the suspect was shot with the gun, and you have 5, 6. They waited to pull this guy off the train until they had backup. When they eventually held up the train, they tased him, they shot him, they shot 3 other people. It was just going on. And I feel like the details are also being kept. So to the point where there's some accounts have seen as 2, some 3. It's not clear who they're exactly referring to. But it is very, very clear. I'll tell you one thing that is very, very clear is that these people, when put in a situation of power that the police are, should not be using guns in situations like these. I mean, you got the numbers gap. The fact that this guy isn't even armed in the first place, and you can't, whether it be a taser, whether it can be a taser in a kind of surround situation, you are putting not only, again, not just his life at line, but very, very clearly other people's lives on the line, including your very own colleagues. So, clearly big evaluation needs to be done, I think. And it's become clear for a long time about police having guns, and that a very big evaluation needs to be done. And, of course, at least under Eric Adams' administration, I doubt that anything in terms of progress will be made in that arena. Wanted to end today's show with a really good piece here from Jack Merkinson in the Discourse blog, a great Substack to check out. He writes, on Sunday, Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance straight up admitted that his despicable attacks on Haitian immigrants, by the way, so bad at this, it's just like, come on. Like, you are not really trying very, very hard to even do pogrom inciting racism if you just admit that it's a complete lie. If you just admit that it's a complete lie at the drop of a hat. It's really kind of, almost was a low effort. Here he is talking about it.
The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to, create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana.
If I have to create stories, so again, just completely saying that it was a hoax, it was BS, it was a lie, it is very, very cool that now we've had 2 colleges and I think it's a high school that have been shut down because of the threats. Vance really kind of made everyone flip out by saying this. You can see in the video there, Bash's eyes are just like, what? Okay. She just blinks, kind of multiple times. And the one institution, though, that I think Merkinson kind of really aptly points out here that is remaining quite calm is the Democratic Party. I spent some time looking to see what the party had said about the Springfield horror, and from what I can tell, the answer is not much. Neither Kamala Harris nor Tim Walz nor the Democratic National Committee appears to have made any public statement, neither written or spoken, about the terror that Haitians and their neighbors in Springfield are going through as a direct result of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance whipping up Nazi-style hatred against them. Instead, the party has decided to lean into the weirdness of Trump ranting about cats at last week's debate rather than highlight the bigotry underlying those rants. And really, these active threats of violence are happening right now in American communities. Harris has used that tactic at the debate, laughing at Trump rather than hammering his racism. The one Democrat who's briefly said anything about it was Joe Biden, who said the following at a Congressional Black Caucus gala, which was quite solid.
My predecessor calls the insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol on January 6th patriots. But when peaceful protesters marched for justice for George Floyd, Trump wanted to send in the military, but they wouldn't go. He says immigrants, black and brown immigrants, poison the blood of our country. Right now, his running mate is attacking Haitian Americans in Ohio. It's wrong. It's got to stop.
So, again, probably, maybe the best mind commander there with that kind of a condemnation. Harris spoke at the same event, but made no mention of Springfield. The president making a statement is obviously not nothing, but Biden having a hugely diminished figure now and not really just mentioning it kind of in passing is not enough given this situation. If you see the situation in the UK, this is how this kind of stuff happens. Far-right, extremist, anti-immigrant sentiment getting so actualized and so mainstream that it leads to eventually where you have 100 people next time in the street chanting for crazy things a la Charlottesville, And if you don't call this stuff out, if you let it get emboldened, if you let it kind of get fed into, and if you don't make that alternative argument and you lead it to Dana Bash or whoever, like, that is a real dereliction of political duty. But really, I think he gets into this here. The main reason for the conspicuous silence is that Democrats don't want to say anything that makes them seem too welcoming towards immigrants. The party sees immigration as a third rail and is now determined to match the GOP when it comes to cracking down. Long gone are outrage visits to the border or pledges, including from Harris, to re-examine the role of ICE that we saw during the Trump years. Now Biden is helping to deploy the hard right to seek asylum helping destroy the right to seek asylum in this country, and Harris is touting his support for the hard-right bipartisan border bill that stalled in Congress this past winter. Presumably, the strategists from Kamala HQ think that standing up for the rights of people from Haiti, a country that's been immiserated and left in ruins by centuries of American imperialism, would cut across this mission, invite questions about Harris's border policies, and give Trump and Vance an excuse to hammer her on a vulnerable issue. This has been the game plan for months and months. I went back and looked at the transcripts from both presidential debates and from Harris's extended CNN interview with Bash. Not once across these three events did Biden or Harris ever object to the idea of deporting 11 million immigrants from the United States or mount any defense whatsoever of immigrants or immigration. They cannot talk about it. They refuse. And I think that is why. It was really Jack Merkinson. You should read the whole piece on discourseblog.com. When the way he puts it there, I think really shows the dangers of what this kind of hands-off, actively anti-immigration policy by the Democrats now is going to lead to. It's hate like this spreading unchallenged, because Democrats are supposed to be the force in this country, as inadequate as they are, that are supposed to challenge us. And the fact that they are not is really telling and really disturbing. All right, that's all we have for you today. It's Newsflash.